It's the Happy Families podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
Everybody's circumstances is different. Everybody's needs are different. And so I think what this study just highlights is as long as we're taking into consideration the needs of our family, the needs of our children, that we kind of can't get it wrong.
And now here's the stars of our show, my mum and dad.
Quick question for you, Kylie. How old were you when you got your first telephone?
I would have been 18.
That's right.
And you brought it from me.
I did. Do you remember the kind of phone that it was?
It was a Nokia.
No. It was an NEC Fido. I don't know if anyone remembers the NEC Fido, but you and I were engaged. I was living in Mount Isa working on the radio. You were living in Brisbane at home with your parents. You were 18 years old.
With the phone on the wall.
That's right. Yeah, I would call. Your mum would answer the phone and then call out, Kylie, Justin's on the phone for you. And you would have to walk into the living room and pick up the phone and sit next to it because it was attached to the wall. Oh, my goodness.
And then many times, because we would spend long hours talking, we'd be kicked off because somebody else had
to use the phone.
Or they were expecting a phone call.
Our kids don't know what it's like, do they? They don't know what it's like for the phone to ring and there it is on the wall and someone actually picks it up in the kitchen and stands there and has a conversation standing next to the wall. And then, do you remember, I don't know if this ever happened in your house, but I'd be on the phone talking to a girl that I had a crush on, and all of a sudden I'd hear my sisters giggling because they'd picked up one of the other phones in the other room, which obviously connected them to the call. Like kids these days, they got a phone and
so much fun they miss out on.
The stories they could tell, the experiences they could have. So yeah, you got your first mobile phone. I bought it for you while we were engaged so that I could talk to you without having to talk to your mum first.
Uninterrupted.
The NEC Fido, and since then it's just all been downhill, hasn't it? The phones have become prolific and ubiquitous and everyone has them. And with Christmas just around the corner now, I know that there's going to be a whole lot of parents who are having to deal with kids saying, Mum, can I have a phone? I'm going into grade 7 next year. I'm in grade 8 next year, or I've got to catch the bus next year. Can I please have a phone? So we thought it would be a good idea to have a conversation today about the right age for kids to get their first phone, to get their first mobile, to get their first smartphone. Now, I've always said kids don't need smartphones, they need smart parents, and smart parents give their kids dumb phones.
Can you buy a dumb phone anymore?
It's very, very hard to do that these days, but you can, and I still stand by it. I still think, to the extent that it's possible, while your kids are young, if you think that they need a phone, the less accessibility, the less technology that's involved in that telephone, the better.
The challenge you have, though, is that those dumb phones are actually designed and marketed to young children. So to try and get a teenager using a dumb phone, you wouldn't.
Yes. So, I mean, the Space Talk watches, we've had them for our kids and they've been great. But once they get to about grade 6, they're kind of like, yeah, maybe grade 7, I really want a phone now. I'm not really cool with this anymore. And they just sort of stopped wearing them. Really, really like that though. If you've got younger kids, a Space Talk watch, and there's a few other dumb phones that are on the market. But I guess the purpose of our conversation today is to consider when's your child ready for a smartphone? When's it time to go and buy the fully connected, got everything phone? And what do you need to think about when it comes to making that purchase?
And I think every parent wants you to give them the exact number.
Well, if you caught our lightning rounds during the last school holidays, all of the great guests that we've had on the podcast, I get them to do a quick lightning round with me, and I've asked them all of these questions. And one of them is, at what age should a child get their first smartphone? And everyone hedges, everyone fudges around. Every now and again, someone will say 12. They'll just, there it is, there's the number, done. I found a website called Is My Child Ready for a Smartphone? It's called Wait Until 8th. There's an entire movement in the United States saying, don't give your kids a smartphone until 8th grade. But I thought we should have a conversation about things to consider and then talk about what the science says. So when you think about the decision to let the kids have a smartphone, what considerations would apply before you would say, okay, now's the time? What are your top couple?
So for me, safety is 100% the top focus. If my children are catching a bus or walking to and from school, or will be away from me for long periods of time, I want to be able to contact them.
Which I find really curious because when we were growing up, wasn't an issue. You'd just say, see you, Mum, and you'd disappear and be gone all day. I remember when I was a kid, as a teenager, I'd catch the bus to the beach. I lived at Erina on the New South Wales Central Coast. I'd catch the bus either to Terrigal or Wombrel or Foresters Beach, or sometimes out to Avoca, and I'd go surfing all day. And when I was done, I'd catch the bus home, and I'd just say, I'll be home this arvo. And that was it. Or if I was...
think that parenting has evolved a lot more, and I think that in general, parents were a lot more detached a generation ago.
I don't know if detached is the right word. My parents loved me. They were just happy to let me go and catch a bus to the beach and hang out all day. They were fine. They loved me, though. You make me question my value to my parents.
No, but I also know that for my parents specifically, it was really stressful because they couldn't contact me.
Yes.
And so their stress levels were through the roof until they actually had me home safe.
Right. And there is that whole thing, when you get there, give me a call. I remember Mum and Dad saying that all the time to me, to my sisters. When you get there, give me a call. If there's any problems, just ask somebody if you can use their phone. Of course, that involved knocking on somebody's door or going into a shop or something like that. But I also remember we always had to have money on us so that we could stop at one of the payphones and throw some money into the payphone and call to let our parents know where they were. So I get the whole safety thing. When the kids are having a sleepover, when they're hanging out with friends, you just want to be able to text them and check in. So that's your first consideration. What's your second one? Because, I mean, that could mean at the age of 5 or 6, you've got to give your kids a phone, right?
Well, I guess for some families that might be the case. My 5 or 6-year-old wouldn't be away from me to need a phone.
Okay. What other considerations would you have, though, before, other than safety? Why else would you give your child a phone?
For me, that's pretty much it. That's my list.
Okay, so what would you be worried about? Why would you say, I'm not sure if you're ready for a phone, even though I want to be able to be in touch with you when you're away from me?
Just the accessibility to different apps.
So content?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all there, like literally in their hands.
My additional concerns are a refusal to participate in social situations. The phone facilitates withdrawal rather than interaction and engagement. I'm also concerned about sleep, and I'm also concerned about physical activity. Like, once that phone's there, if they've got a phone and a charger, they're pretty happy to sit on the backside and game or social media one another all day and all night. And so they miss out on the fullness of what life offers. And that's something that even adults struggle with. And so there's some real challenges around that. The more parents that I talk to, the more consistently I hear parents basically say once the kids start catching the bus to school or once they go to high school, that's when they get a smartphone. That seems to be the consensus. So I thought I would do a little bit of digging around and find some research on when the golden rule applies for getting kids their first phone. I came across a new study out of Stanford University that sheds some light on the topic.
I'm really interested. What did it say?
It found no meaningful association at all. No meaningful association, no correlation between the age at which children receive their first phones and their well-being, as measured by 3 things: their grades, their sleep habits, and the level of depression that they experience. In other words, you can give a child a phone at 8 or at 18 or anywhere in between, and it's essentially not going to have any impact on their grades, their sleep habits, or how depressed they are. That's the short version of it. We will link to the write-up of the study, so not the actual study. So it
doesn't talk about any likelihood of exposure to negative content or anything like that. We are literally just talking about specific habits.
Yeah, that's right. So this is a population-based study, and we're looking at really general kind of variables. In fact, if we really wanted to understand the impact of devices on kids and their well-being, what we would have to do is look at content. Look at not how old they are when they've got it, and not even look at how much they're using it, but look at what they're doing while they're on it. That's the key. That's what we've really got to worry about. So I wanted to link to that because I think that it should give parents a little bit of comfort knowing that you can't really get this thing right or wrong. Kids were no better off if they got a phone at 14 than if they got a phone at 10 or even at 15 or 16. It didn't make any difference in either a positive or a negative direction, regardless of the age. Your child's not disadvantaged by having to wait. They're not advantaged by having to wait.
It also doesn't acknowledge the impact that this has on their connections with friends either.
Correct. So it's a pretty general study looking just at those 3 things. But I think that there's comfort there. Grades, unaffected. Sleep, surprisingly, generally unaffected. And they had the kids wearing an accelerometer. So I think that might be a little bit of a weakness there, because if I'm wearing an accelerometer and I'm laying in bed staring at my phone, the accelerometer may give it shows that I'm immobile. So the data might show that my sleep is happening, but I'm not asleep at all. I'm just staring at my screen in my bedroom. So I think that there are question marks on that specific finding. But in relation to, like I said, grades and depressive symptoms, we've got good measures for those two things, and they were generally unaffected. Therefore, early or late phone acquisition, in terms of impact on well-being and arguably sleep and certainly grades, it doesn't seem to make any difference. What I think really matters when we're deciding whether to give our kids a phone or not is their capacity to regulate their use and avoid unsafe, unhealthy content. That's kind of it, which means they're the conversations we need to have.
What I love about this study is just this acknowledgement that I think for the most part, as parents, in spite of how challenging this area is to navigate with our children, that as we make decisions based on the needs of our children, we're more likely to get things right for our family.
Yes.
It's the right fit for our family. And I recognise that for so long, there's probably been a lot of parental judgment going on based on they gave their child a phone at 10. But everybody's circumstances is different. Everybody's needs are different. And so I think what this study just highlights is, as long as we're taking into consideration the needs of our family, the needs of our children, that we kind of can't get it wrong.
Yeah.
And it's really about having those conversations with our kids, pre-arming them, and then continuing to educate them as they grow and mature so that they can navigate the challenges that are in front of them.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. You can't get it wrong. And there's no need for any parent shaming around this. I think they're really the take-home messages. So if you want to get your kids a phone for Christmas, do it. But make sure you have regular conversations. Make sure that they know the risks. Make sure that you're monitoring what's going on and that they're living a full and whole life. I mean, we can get involved in a whole lot more nuance around this. There's some really great content that Jocelyn Brewer puts out. You can find her stuff around digital nutrition, and I recommend Jocelyn's work really, really highly. She's actually got a new webinar out all about when you should give your kids a mobile phone, and she unsurprisingly comes to a fairly similar conclusion. I just want to highlight as well, this was a really smart study. It was in a highly regarded journal called Child Development. It was a 5-year longitudinal study. Like the data here, they haven't just pulled this stuff out of the air and said, oh yeah, look, it'll be fine. These are Stanford researchers. It's really, really great stuff. So
I know you're the parenting expert and you've just said if you want to get your kids a phone, give them a phone, but I'm going to put my little disclaimer in there.
Oh, I said that a little bit glibly.
You did.
Yeah, I did. I'm glad you pulled me up on that, because I shouldn't be that glib about it.
I would always delay as long as is possible.
And we've done that. We've absolutely done that consistently.
Because just like buying a family pet has lots of positives, there are a whole heap of cons that you have to deal with, and you are bringing in more challenges.
It adds to your workload as a parent.
Totally. So, yeah.
And the costs.
My suggestion is delay. But when the time is right, you don't need to feel guilty about it. Make the decision and then move forward.
See, I was just wrapping up the podcast and using that as a throwaway line. You've picked me up on it and you've done the right thing. We really hope, though, that this has been a helpful conversation for you. Tomorrow, we'll be answering a question from a listener that I think is a really important one for anyone with a child who is neurodivergent. We're going to be talking a little bit about ADHD. And then on Wednesday, such a super important conversation with Dr. Anthea Rhodes from the Royal Children's Hospital. They've got a new poll out about kids and water safety. This is one you don't want to miss. So much coming up this week on the Happy Families podcast. Thank you so much for listening. As always, we appreciate our producer, Justin Rulon from Bridge Media. He does such great work. Justin, thank you for what you do. Craig Bruce is our executive producer. We love him too. And if you'd like more information about making your family happier or about the things we've talked about today, check the show notes for the podcast episode today, or visit us on our Facebook page, Dr. Justin Coulson's Happy Families, or at happyfamilies.com.au.